Hi there, my name's Johnny. I'm from the Student Wellbeing team and welcome to another one of our short workshops. This one is on exam stress and it's particularly just about challenging some of our thoughts with regards to exam stress. Exams can be an incredibly stressful time for many, with a lot of pressure on us from kind of ourselves and from other kind of factors and sources as such as well. And as such, kind of under that pressure, some people kind of manage, others more commonly kind of find it really difficult. This is just to offer a number of short kind of tips, ideas, information for you to consider as part of kind of challenging thoughts around exam stress. But I also hope that this information allows you to go off, kind of find out some more to kind of fully kind of stock yourself in terms of kind of a toolkit of ideas for coping with such stress as well. So let's get straight into it. Cool. First of all, I just want to introduce the idea of what we think affects how we feel, and what we think and how we feel affects what we do. Thoughts, feelings, behaviors. This is a common kind of idea, kind of used within a therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it just helps us kind of understand that relationship between our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. So to go into that a little bit further, I've got this kind of helpful ABC. So the antecedent, the kind of what's kind of happened for kind of us to maybe have thoughts, basically, what's kind of gone on. Our behaviors, kind of what's gone on as a result of that, how have we acted, and then the consequences as a result of kind of the thoughts and behaviors. So let's just kind of break this down a little bit. So you're going into an exam and you might be experiencing negative thoughts about that exam or a submission kind of some work that you might have. What this might lead to is some kind of challenging, difficult kind of behaviors that you're kind of facing, which might increase feelings of anxiety, linked to avoidance around kind of maybe completing some of your goals on time, and being able to even just get started with the work. Some people kind of report kind of almost kind of a mental block, finding it really difficult to get going. And use of kind of maybe negative distractions. All of a sudden, kind of some of the chores that you're meant to have been doing kind of seems like a much more appealing task than sitting down and kind of doing some revision or kind of completing a submission. So some of the consequences as a result of the kind of thoughts and behavior so far, you're going to probably find that you might have some temporary relief from maybe some anxiety. And that whilst that's great, ultimately long term, it can then lead to pressures to complete kind of your work, but not at the usual standards. It might link to a loss of confidence in yourself and kind of further anxiety as that cycle continues. So what we can see here, almost just bringing it back to the last slide, that we can kind of get ourselves into a negative loop sometimes as it kind of further just extenuates, especially over the long term, and means that that becomes kind of our kind of patterns for managing, which can be really difficult. So when we're thinking about how we break these cycles, a lot of it goes back to kind of what our initial thoughts we're having and how to best challenge them. At times, this is difficult in the moment, but it is possible. At points, it's sometimes better to use reflection. So after kind of maybe you've been through some of that stress, reflect on what's happened and almost kind of reprogram your brain through reflection and thinking, okay, what could I have done differently to that? So challenging some of your negative thoughts, that's what we're going to have a look at here for a moment. Um, Asking yourself such questions really just to try and help you find some balance. So am I falling into a thinking trap? Am I overestimating the danger? Am I catastrophizing? Is this a fact or does it sound like a false belief? And remember that what we think isn't necessarily always true. Thoughts are not facts. We have hundreds of thousands of thoughts a day, many of them negative in origin as such, but we can challenge these thoughts as mentioned. What's the worst that can logically happen? Just try to kind of figure out, okay, if I do fail this, is there other options? Most likely there are numerous attempts in life to kind of retry kind of with education. You only get one life though as well, so in terms of kind of catastrophic kind of thinking that we might have, which might take us down the line of kind of suicidal thoughts and thinkings, remember that there's always other options with education, but ultimately you only get this one life of course as well, so be kind to yourself and look after yourself. Am I 100% sure that something will happen? Will failing happen? Has it happened before? It might be that kind of sometimes um, it's not likely that you're going to fail, but it's just a thought. It's you might not have kind of necessarily failed before, but it's more kind of in your head than the reality of it, if that makes some sense. So just trying to again challenge that. Is something so important that my future depends on it? And of course, education is, but it's again that reminder that there's always kind of opportunities to reset. There's always kind of other options out there in terms of kind of jobs, careers. There is a future out there kind of for everyone. Just should you kind of be able to kind of take that step back, of course, as well, and make sure you look after yourself. Um, what would I tell a friend who's had this thought? Often when we're in our own mind, we're only able to kind of see things from our own emotionally filled perspective. Whereas when we think about what we might say to a friend, sometimes it can help us kind of think more rationally about the problem we might be facing. When we're giving advice to a friend, often we're not as emotionally invested, helping us see things a little bit more clearly. And what would a friend say about these things to me? I guess just kind of taking that step back and thinking, what would someone else kind of advise in that case? Is this a hassle or a horror? Is this kind of a problem, or is it just is it the worst case scenario? It's often just a problem, and a problem that can be overcome with time. Time heals a lot. Kind of time heals in terms of kind of submissions come and go, and as such, the stress comes and goes with it, and life kind of goes on in that sense. Is this a possibility or a certainty? And most of the time with our negative thoughts, it's only a possibility. It's not a certainty, of course, as well. Just some further thoughts. So it's thinking is okay. Think it's okay to problem solve. It's okay to take a step back and think about maybe the problems we're facing. However, overthinking can increase our stress. It's important to take a step back every so often to ensure that our thinking doesn't become overthinking. So in terms of kind of how to stop some of that overthinking, plan specific times to think about it. Allow yourself sections in the day where you can kind of think about those problems and problem solve, but try not to stray too far outside of those things and use distractions kind of outside of that. Put a time limit on it. Don't allow overthinking to continue endlessly, as I've just mentioned, and distract yourself, as mentioned. Firmly tell yourself to stop thinking about it. Write the problems down. It helps kind of get the problem out of our head and onto paper. Sometimes that can help us process kind of maybe what we're facing. Limit your choices. Fewer choices make it easier in terms of deciding. Let go of perfection. Strive for good enough rather than perfect. I meet so many students that have really high goals, and a lot of the time they kind of get there anyway, but it's just kind of going in with that mindset of actually let's manage the stress by taking some of the pressure off and kind of search for kind of good enough and see where you kind of go from there. Embrace mistakes. Mistakes and disagreements are part of our own growth process. Stay present and focused. Don't spend too much time in what if land. We do this as human beings. We catastrophize. We think the worst. We almost live in that kind of what if land as opposed to reality. And it's important to keep ourselves grounded. Control the controllables. When it comes to kind of exams, there is so much stress that kind of goes around kind of with it. There are things that feel outside of our control and our influence, but it's then important to think about what can you do in terms of kind of when we're going with exams, kind of it's so important just to look after our general well-being. So keep on top of kind of your diet, keep on top of things like sleep. Whilst in terms of you might not always have an appetite, but knowing that okay, you can control maybe just kind of trying to have something, anything at regular intervals, even if that is kind of smoothies or meal replacement kind of things that people have, just to keep your energy levels up through kind of the fuel that food offers us. Going to bed at reasonable times, of course, it might be tricky. You might be struggling with sleep as a result of stress. And of course, that might feel like it's outside of your control, but you can control kind of maybe going to bed that little bit earlier, trying to relax, trying to switch off, trying to go from there. Controlling, kind of maybe kind of putting time aside kind of for that revision and kind of assignment. It might feel as though you can't get started with it, but having that time aside is a start, of course, as well. Consider kind of some of the things that you can influence, but also recognize some of those things that are outside of your control in order to not allow the stress of the situation to take over in too much of a way. Don't underestimate the power of just breathing, just being able to kind of calm ourselves through breathing strategies. A popular one is square breathing, which is represented kind of within this diagram here, which encourages us to kind of draw a square. We can do it kind of a large square, or we can do kind of more subtle squares. But let me show you kind of in a larger way, and I'll talk through more subtle ways. So take one finger, start in the top corner of an imaginary square, breathe in to the count of 5. Hold for 5 seconds, drawing down. Breathe out for 5, back across, and hold for 5, kind of drawing back up, repeating. So draw the top line as you breathe in, hold as you draw down, back across as you breathe out, and hold to complete the squares. You can do that kind of more subtly on the palm of your hand, on your knee, or even just using your eyes to trace around something. Breathing strategies helps get more oxygen into the lungs. More oxygen in the lungs gets more oxygen into the bloodstream. More oxygen in the bloodstream kind of gets more oxygen up to the brain. It helps kind of us reduces headaches, it reduces kind of dizziness. It can maybe help us think straight a little bit. It can reduce our heart rate, it can cool our core body temperature, and it can help us just feel that little bit more relaxed. I and many others swear by breathing strategies. They can be incredibly helpful kind of in exam sessions, before interviews, and first dates as well, as a way of just controlling kind of our nervous system that we might be kind of facing. But they can also be incredibly useful when just helping us keep focused when we're kind of revising as well. Just be aware of symptoms of excessive stress. When you look at this slide and see kind of some of the symptoms linked to the body, minds, our emotions, and our behaviors, you'll probably kind of recognize half a dozen of these that might kind of happen. In some senses, it's normal. Stress is a normal part of kind of preparation for exams because they matter, because it's important to us, and because we want to do well. So as such, stress is normal to a certain extent. If you can kind of embrace it, go with it, know it's going to come and it's going to happen, but that you can be okay. However, excessive stress is when things might become a problem. And if you notice a number of these things kind of happening kind of all or most of the time, and you're not able to kind of manage or control them, you might be dealing with excess stress. And at these points, you might want to seek out professional help, speaking to someone from the wellbeing team, booking in with your GP, and just exploring some of those options as you try and kind of find a way of managing that stress. Certainly, if the stress remains after exams, then it's also kind of showing maybe the possibility of underlying problems that you might just wish to kind of speak to a professional about and understand that bit further. Cool. Thanks again for kind of checking out one of our quick workshops. Don't forget to check out the Student Wellbeing Services websites. Use the QR code. We've also got a QR code here for you just to complete some feedback on the workshops. And just want to say thank you again. Cheers. Bye.